I think I get it. Like, gender, it's complicated.
Me, I'm Kaz now.
You came back.
You were never exactly girly.
It's me.
Yeah, nah.
I mean, your mum tried.
There's your mum. You tell her.
That's what I liked about you. Or one of the things. You weren't like the other girls.
It's because I wasn't one.
Do you know what just happened in there? Didn't hear any sirens, so I'm guessing your dad didn't have a heart attack.
You needed me.
You know, when you left, I got pretty messed up. I loved you. And I thought this would be weird. But it's not.
Kia ora and welcome to Trans Vegas 2021. My name is Zorian Clayton and I'm one of the programmers of the festival, and I've been on the board of Trans Creative since the first year of its running in 2017. And I'm also one of the programmers for the BFI Flair Festival, and we screened the feature of Rurangi in the festival. It was one of our most popular films, and I'm really, when I was asked what are your hot picks that we can have in Trans Vegas for 2021, I immediately thought of this, and it's the general fabulousness and this huge cast of trans, non-binary and gender diverse people, also the ethics behind the production and all the training and consulting that occurred throughout the making of it is really like a masterclass for the industry in how to do it well. So check out the rurangi.com website because it's a brilliant resource for ethical production. And the hashtag on there is by us and about us, which couldn't be more perfect for Trans Vegas. So please welcome Cole Meyers, who is the writer and co-producer of the Rurangi web series and feature film. Welcome, Cole.
Hi. Kia ora.
Hello. Hi. So we met once before in when we did a virtual chat for the other festival, but it's great to have you with us for this. So yeah, the first sort of question for our UK audiences who might never have had the pleasure of visiting New Zealand, can you just sort of paint a picture of what the trans and non-binary scene is like there, kind of from an arts and cultural perspective? Like, what is the Trans Vegas equivalent in New Zealand?
We don't have a Trans Vegas equivalent. And in fact, when I was asking a couple of friends about this, they were like, "Whoa, an entire film festival that's like trans people making films and things? Like, that's amazing." And I was very quick to clarify. This is films made by trans people, not just about trans people, because that could be a clusterfuck of a film festival.
Yeah.
But yeah, as far as the arts and culture scene, I think it goes to say about all sort of trans people around the world is we're a bunch of fucking talented people. We're like making amazing shit and like so creative and just got so much passion for change and just the, I guess, innate activism of being yourself and talking about your experience. It's that crappy thing of like, that, oh, you mean me just being alive is an activist, act, but, it is when you're looking at the mental health stats and things like that, for trans and gender diverse people, is it's like, being alive is a revolutionary act.
Yeah, and there's a lot of there's a lot of activism happening that you've been involved with in New Zealand. So there's sort of thriving groups happening around specific issues.
Yeah, absolutely. Our activist organisation in New Zealand that's specifically for trans and non-binary people is called Gender Minorities Aotearoa, which is an amazing resource as well, as far as like wanting to know what the status of like legal stuff is, or as far as like health pathways, or you know, as detailed or as overview as you want for that. In fact, we use some of their posters and resources in the scene in Rurangi where our activists are postering on K Road, Karangahape Road. They're actual real posters by gender diverse artists made through gender minorities. Which is really cool. Yeah, I mean, that was one of the really exciting things about, you know, being in charge, making this film. So we got to do, you know, as much sort of stuff like that as we possibly could. It's like, oh, we need some, you know, posters saying awesome stuff about trans people. Well, you know, who should we hire to do that? Maybe some trans people who are awesome artists. You know, we need some musicians to, you know, a musician to record our song over the credits. Like, who should we get? Oh, maybe, you know, an amazing trans artist. And just all the kinds of stuff like that, that it's always been something that's been really important to me, to be like, how much more can you do? Or how many levels down can you go, you know? Because I think so often what we see in films, and again, it's films that are about trans people, not ones that are by trans people, but, you know, they kind of, if they get to the level of, we hired a trans person to play a trans person, it's like, have a giant pat on the back, you know, which is a terrible like, you know, if that's your standard for like, good job, like, you know, that's pretty crap.
I know. I really think it's changed in the last sort of 2 years, even in the films that have been submitted in the 5 years that I've been programming for Flair. In the 5 years ago, you know, most of the actors in any of the fictional stuff, they were cis people. But, you know, the last 2 years, it was almost like, you know, these shouldn't even be considered because audiences just aren't having it anymore. So I think, you know, we've turned a huge corner, I think, and a lot of that is the activism of the audiences and people.
And I think, like, if we could have a longer hashtag, it would probably be by us and about us and for us. Yeah. Because, you know, you can make films by trans people and you can make them about trans lives. But another really important thing about Rurangi was, you know, our primary audience was trans people. It wasn't, you know, explaining trans lives to cis people, which meant, you know, there's that, and you know when you read something or you watch something or you go, like, has this been written to speak to me that other people, you know, will find it interesting or engaging or like inspiring or whatever, but its primary audience is people like me, you know, and there were lots of things like that in just what we presented that was thinking about it from that point of view. You know, it was really important to me that we weren't going to be dead naming our main character. You know, there's a scene where our main character Kaz is postering over a really turfy slogan that's up on the wall, but I was like, I don't want to see it though. So, you know, and that was a really interesting thing, you know, working with the director Max Curry, that it had to be this really collaborative kind of process and this process where we were working together, and I would say, okay, you know, we need to know that our main character is covering over some real gross, like, you know, biological essentialism, turfy shit. Yeah. But we need to not show that. And I don't want them to say what it says out loud. So, you know, you work out, director man. Like, how do you want to shoot that it makes it clear that that's what's happening? and one where Kaz is looking at is going through his old house, his dad's house, where he lived before leaving to go to Auckland and transitioning. And in the script, I think I wrote something like Kaz walks down the hallway looking at photos, from
childhood,
a baby and chronologically, but I didn't want to show. One, it was really important that we weren't going to show pictures of our main actor, like pre-transition or anything like that, because again, a lot of the decisions were operating from if TERFs could get hold of this information, they'll use it. I don't want those I don't want to have put Els in that kind of position where he had to provide that. I don't want to put any kind of thing where our main character will get dead named in some media thing future, that's being shitty. I don't want them to exist. So actually, the only thing you see is a very out of focus picture, which kind of there's a bit of pink in a bit of clothing. But and I didn't actually know this until later. I asked them about it, like how they got it really out of focus, and they were like, because the picture was out of focus on the wall, like it wasn't a tricky camera thing, like it literally only existed in a very blurry version. And some just really creative use of sound effects and things like that in a scene where it needs to be clear that our main character is being dead named, but there is no dead name exists for him. It doesn't exist in the script. It doesn't, there's a close-up of the person saying Kaz's dead name. And I remember Max ringing me up and being like, "Oh, but we need something so that our mayor so we can see shaping these words with her mouth. Like there needs to be something for her to say." And I was like, "So make up literally like 2 or 3 random syllables. Like I do not want it to exist in the world because I know, the TERFs are bloody resourceful in their shittiness. If it exists, somehow it'll be found out, and then there'll be articles that are like, Kaz real name, blah blah blah. But just little things like that like maybe cis audience members might not even necessarily pick up that there is usually that there, and there's not in this case. But I know that trans and gender diverse audience members have consistently and repetitively brought it up as being like, those were the moments that I really, really knew that you had our back. That you were looking out for us, not just let's present some trauma, for for other people's enjoyment.
And it's that authenticity that really comes through and speaks to trans audiences so much.
That's often an excuse in many ways used for why we need to show lots of trans people having really shitty lives, or yet another film with trans people in it dying, or things like that. And this idea that but that's the reality and things like that. And it's like, yes, that might be the reality for some trans people, and that might be, and it's really, it fucking is awful that we have such terrible mental health statistics, and there is so much violence enacted against trans people, but we're never ever going to change that if that's all trans people ever see. Because one thing that I like to talk about is, because I do a lot of consulting work on other projects with trans characters and things like that, and the question that I always first ask people is like, why do you want to make this? Like, what is it that you're hoping will happen because of this? And it's always coming from a good place. People say that I want to help essentially make trans people's lives better. But I was like, but what is the way in which you want that to occur? And so often what the pathway of that happening, when all we're showing is trans trauma and violence against trans people, is the pathway for changing things for trans people is, let's show all the cis people how shitty trans lives are, is that what their mindset is, so that they will be not so awful to trans people. So not so many awful things will happen to trans people and that will make their lives better. I was like, I don't that's this really like cis savior narrative stuff as well. But also it's like
Yeah.
I don't want to see that. Like I know that happens. Like
Yeah.
it's not a huge surprise to me that like trans people have like it's a lot of shitty stuff happens to us.
Yeah.
What I want to see is I want to see trans people fucking owning it and being successful and having love and relationships and successful careers and community and all of that good stuff, because how else I want to show so that I feel like that's a possibility, so I go out there and own it and feel like there's something to strive for and to live for and to support my friends for.
There was a lot of reviews of the film that said this work is going to save lives, which is strong praise indeed, but it was absolutely true. It's like a real beacon of representation and visibility in all the right ways. I've seen a lot of films where it's obvious that it's a cis director and they've met a trans person for the first time and they were like, oh wow, this is interesting, and they've decided to make a documentary, and so it just covers the absolute basics, sort of 101. And I know, there's very little interest in that anymore, and people are just crying out to see so many more narratives. And this is just absolutely packed with so many different narratives that, we so rarely get to see. And each one of them could have been, a whole different story arc of its own kind of thing.
That's what season 2 and beyond is for. It's for expanding on those. And it's that thing as well, is it's like the other thing that you see often in mainstream stuff is if they don't go the way of like, trans trauma and death, is they kind of go, oh God, I so don't want to make any mistakes. Also, I'll just make trans people perfect. And it's like, that's not actually that helpful either though, because I don't relate to that. That's not my life. That's not my friends. That's not a possibility model for me. Because that's a possibility model for no one. No one's perfect. Whereas if you see, hey, it's possible to have, struggles and like complex stuff going on and crappy things happen, and to be a bit of a jerk, and to be a complicated 3-dimensional person, and still also, be confident and be successful and have love and romance.
Exactly. I mean, it was the romantic, without giving too much away for people that haven't watched the whole thing in other festivals or whatever. It's the romantic storylines of Kaz, I thought, were very brilliantly done. I think that's something that's really missing from narratives that we see, is that overlap of gender identity and sexuality, and how that shifts for people over time as their identities evolve and that kind of thing. And I mean, one of the things I'm sick of seeing is that lots of scenes of people going to the doctors, and that's like a lot of the stuff that's in those kind of I'm like sick of that.
When we started off this, I wrote this big list of all the things I didn't want to see, which were things like dead naming and blah blah blah, but it was things like, I don't want to see another scene of like standing in front of the mirror caressing my scars, like or injecting some testosterone but like incorrectly, like or things like that, where it's like, I say it jokingly, when they're like, I'm injecting my man hormones that I do every single day, and I inject it in my arm while I'm lifting weights, like because but it's also, it's like the thing that trans people get watching that is, it's like, if you'd asked anyone that actually did that, or injected testosterone, they'd tell you that's not how it's done. So the fact that at no point during this entire process of creating a film, which is from very first story points and things like that to like editing room, at no point was anyone like me given enough power to say, oi, that's wrong. And that's the bit that we can't always articulate. That's what we're feeling hurt when we watch something by, or that's what we're feeling shut out by, or that's how we know that it's not by us. But it's like It's like when you see major cosmetic ads, you look at it and you're like, wow, that's really racist, you know?
Mm.
And you're like, and you know how big of how amount of money would have gone into this and how many people are involved. And you
Millions.
go, at
Yeah.
no point in these
Nobody-
thousands
yeah.
of people that were involved was anyone that would be able to go, yo, that's really racist.
Yeah.
Like, given any power. And, you know, and that's what, like, so many points during the process of making this, was it really important to keep putting that sense of ownership and that sense of empowerment in the very fabric of it.
Yeah, because there's also this risk, like of just paying lip service to, oh, we're going to do community collaboration or whatever, and then they go and ask some trans people. I know our lovely Kate O'Donnell, who is the host of this whole thing, is does a lot of that work, but then sometimes they don't take up her advice, or you know, they'll be doing some drama for the TV or radio or something, and they'll have you in to consult, and then it's like, do they actually follow through on all of the stuff that you did? So that's why I mean it's so brilliant, the resource that's on your Rurangi website of all the different things that people can do when they're producing something, and that they need to think about it right the way through the whole process, isn't it?
And in all the departments as well. And
on every level.
Yeah, because, you know, it's not just a case of, you know, that you go, okay, we need to cast trans people in trans roles, which even if you're just thinking about that one thing, you also need to think about, well, how are we writing, you know, the casting brief? Are we automatically basically filtering out anyone who'd be good for it because we've made a casting brief that's insensitive and we didn't realize? You know, so I was consulting with the casting directors and things like that on how to write these using language that was not gonna like, you know, turn people away. Because I've seen, you know, I'm also, you know, not so much anymore, but you know, done acting and things like that. And you know, if you read a casting brief that's using language that's like problematic or outdated or incorrectly used or things like that, you know, that gives you a giant red flag for this whole project is probably not going to be the best. Or they're not listening, or they just don't have the people there with the power to make these kind of decisions. But you know, and then it's also about how do we create a safe space in the casting room and in the auditions and things like that, you know, considering you know, all those kind of things, and in wardrobe and makeup and art department, and how are we empowering and creating these, you know, your safe spaces is such as kind of like buzzword, but you know, how are we making places that are respecting and valuing trans experiences and trans bodies and trans people's knowledge. You know, we had just and thinking about you know, consultation. Before I said yes to Rurangi right back at the beginning, I'd had a series of crappy experiences where I'd been brought on as a consultant, and you know, for varying reasons, you know, often to do with power dynamics and things like that, they weren't listening to what I was saying, or I wasn't given any kind of ability to really say what I meant. You know, like if you get called up and asked to come and consult, and you know, you're new to the industry and you're there with people who've been in the industry for 20 years, and they turn up with 5 people and you're there on your own, and you're trans and they're all cis, you know, and they're saying, oh, so we're starting filming in 3 days. You know, there are lots of reasons there why I'm not going to tell you your entire premise is fatally problematically flawed. You know, so it's not genuine consulting. Then it's just it's me rubber stamping it and putting you know, my name and my reputation on the line, you know, for something, for generally not being paid enough as well. When I got rung up and told, you know, we're doing this web series, you know, with a trans main character and stuff like that, I was like, all right then, yep, I will, but here are my conditions. And
That's brilliant.
I felt quite like I was just faking my confidence, and I felt quite cheeky asking for it, but I was like, no, I'm not putting myself through that again, because it's awful.
Yeah.
And it just makes you feel like absolutely sick. It's not just being involved with something that's like, a bad piece of art. It's like, this is my life. These are my people. This is my community, my friends, the people I live with, like all of these kind of things. This is people's lives, because, like you said, when the review's saying this, this is a piece of art that, will save lives. And on the flip side of that is, problematic, damaging narratives, are harmful and can cost lives. So it's not just a case of, being involved with a D grade movie or something like that, like and going, well, shouldn't have picked that script. That was a bit of a clunker. This is going, no, actually, we're talking about, whether or not young trans people are seeing, any possibility for a happy future.
And also building community so much, and building, like, I presume, with this whole project, like, you've really brought so many people together who are now, finding strength in that community that you've created with this. Are there lots of different sort of offshoot projects and things that have spun out of it from people who met through the course of Rurangi?
There've been quite a few little bits and pieces. It's just, I think it's also really created a kind of a sense of general empowerment. So just memory problems. I can't name anything in particular, but there's the sense of when, if you're hearing about this project, or you've gone and seen it, or you know that it's in had a theatrical release, or it's won this award overseas, or it's on Hulu in the US and things like that. That really says something about the valuing of people like you. And and when I know for myself, self-esteem and confidence in myself and my abilities has been, the biggest barrier in many ways, as far as, my creative output and things like that, has been because I just, again, it's that, taught your whole life, either explicitly or implicitly, that who you are and what you know and the possibilities for your lives, are less than. It takes a lot to overcome that. And so, knowing that actually, these people put up this much money for this, and these people are supporting it, and this, festival with this prestige has given you this award, or things like that, to someone like me, that even if you're just, not even really thought about the film industry yourself, but you want to paint pictures, or you want to, DJ sometimes, or whatever, there is a real sense of genuine, like, positive possibilities. And I think that even if I was making movies that were about, like sci-fi pirates or something like that had nothing to do with trans people, the fact that it was being made, by someone who is trans, and that was, open about that and able to be open about that, is really empowering.
And it makes, absolutely all the difference when it's in all of the crew and everything. And I wanted to ask you about the casting as well, particularly because there's a couple of people for whom, well, the two main roles, Kaz and Anna Hedda, is that Athena, Rose and Els, this is their debut performances, right, and everything. So can you just talk about how you found them and cast them in this project?
incredible casting director, really. I mean, everyone who's been involved with this, like, because there were so many, like, struggles and things like that, like, everyone that was involved with it had to be really passionate about it. And yeah, so our casting director, Kate Mcgill, me and her had, you know, a number of coffees and you know, great chats, and she was super open about, you know, wanting to know ways to kind of make trans people that were coming in for auditions feel more comfortable and confident. And we had yeah, and even just things like, you know, the forms that you're filling out when you're waiting for your audition, and pointing out things like, you know, asking people questions about body measurements and stuff like that is a area for potentially, you know, major discomfort or dysphoria or things like
That's
that. So
the norm,
any things
if
like
you,
that. Yeah.
If you go for an
you know,
audition, they ask you loads of physical.
yeah, they're
body
often, you know,
questions.
like hip size, waist size, you know, chest size,
Wow.
all these kind of things like that. And I'm, you know, it was just pointing out things like, obviously, yes, at some point you do need to know that, because you need to know whether your clothing's going to fit your actor or not. But you don't need to know that at an audition. You don't need to make every single person that comes in the door right before they go into something where they need to be confident. You know, feel shitty potentially, or be thinking about how, you know, othered they're feeling. Yeah, and just, you know, all kinds of little things like that. I could probably talk for hours and hours and hours about all the things that you're not thinking, you don't necessarily think about unless you have had that experience being on the other side of it. And you're, you know, sensitive to the psychological and, you know, indicators and environments and things like that that you can create in a negative way, or you can create in a positive way. Because, you know, it makes sense. You know, you want your actors to be able to give their best. And and the other thing that we found, you know, that I talked with Max a lot about this, is that around acting and consent, and not just in things like intimacy scenes and stuff like that, but you know, especially for trans people, you know, there could be many different parts of the body which aren't necessarily, like, you know, sexualized parts of the body that may cause dysphoria, you know, or may have, like, trauma memory attached to them. Things like sitting down with all the actors, and again, it was like the things which are really necessary when you're dealing with trans people are also just things which you should be doing with all actors, really. I think all actors should be empowered by their director to be told that they have ultimate, you know, end authority on where and how their bodies are touched, you know, and that these things should be a negotiation between what it is that this scene, you know, or this character or whatever needs, you know, what is the ultimate thing that we're trying to achieve in this scene or with this line or with this movement or whatever like that, and where is this, you know, actor's, you know, safety or comfort boundaries, and how is that a negotiation rather than being this very dictatorial thing about, you know, you touch them there and you touch them there and whatever.
Got it all figured out. Yeah.
And because I know I've been there as an actor and things like that where I felt like I couldn't say no, and not just in intimacy scenes, although that's where it, you know, can present in the most kind of potentially dangerous or disruptive ways, but, you know, in lots of scenes, or you put your hand, you know, on someone's chest, or, you know, or you like anything like that. I was in this play once and I just had to say to the director, I was like, I have to wear something other than suit pants because they make me feel incredibly dysphoric. And
same,
like,
actually.
yes, I could wear them, but surely it would be better if that 90% of my brain was, like, used on, like, feeling confident and, like, you know, present in my role as an actor, and not thinking, oh my god, suit pants, oh my god, my my body. But yeah, the things that are like, you know, necessary when you're dealing with trans people are really just things that should be talked about and should be happening really with all actors and all people involved. I think, you know, having someone whose job on set is just the holistic, you know, health and well-being of all the people there is totally something, you know, that should be happening on all sets.
I was just going to say, if ever I win the lottery, there's a trans tailor in New York who makes amazing suits, and everyone who gets one just looks absolutely amazing. And yeah, I've never been able to wear a suit without just feeling ridiculous and not wanting to go to that wedding because it just doesn't look right. Yeah.
And that's the thing, is these things shouldn't be barriers to doing things like, you know, going to your friend's wedding or, you know, doing what you love. I know for me, for so long, I thought that I had to make, and particularly in relation to acting, that I had to make this choice between, you know, being who I was and doing what I loved. And it was an either or kind of thing. And it shouldn't be, you know. It shouldn't be a case of, do I act or am I myself? And I think that's the amazing thing about trans actors who are paving the way, that we're just seeing this huge influx of like amazingly talented people, you know, and the people that act surprised about that fact. It's like, it's only surprising to you. I know that everyone that I know is like super talented. You just didn't know the people to ask, or the people, or the places to look, or, you know, or you didn't create environments where those people felt, you know, safe or comfortable enough to show you everything that they can do.
I hope this project has shown a lot of people in the industry what you can do, etc. And Els Karad is so great. I mean, you know, so fantastic. And yeah, I mean, we saw him
honestly. That boy is
on
like
RuPaul's Drag Race Down Under as a judge. Hello, like how did that is such a huge
I've never
boon.
watched an episode of RuPaul in my life, and I know that that's a big deal.
We were so excited. We were jumping up and down here, seeing like I don't think I've ever seen RuPaul endorse somebody else's film or creative project like that. I mean, Absolute Vodka or whatever that makeup company is, yes, but like, yeah, like a straight-to-piece thing like Rurangi, check it out now. It's like this platform and that one, like incredible.
Yeah, I know. Like that, Max was like losing his shit because at first was a tweet, I think, that was like from RuPaul saying, you know, check out this film or whatever like that, and Max was like, oh my god, having a meltdown, like RuPaul just like promoted our film and like linked our trailer and stuff like that. And I hope that's the thing that people are seeing from it, is it's like when you let people, you know, make what they want to make for themselves and for people like them, that actually, you know, it's not this question of do I make a film which is authentic, or do I make a film that's made in a compassionate way, or do I make a good film, that I have to make some kind of decision between, like, you're only allowed one or two of those, you can't have all three, but that actually they all feed into each other. And you know, when you're making something in a compassionate way, you know, it makes it more authentic because people can, you know, bring all of themselves to the project, you know. And when you're having people who feel safe making, you know, experimenting or putting their ideas out there, or, you know, being, or not feeling like they have to hide parts of their life when they're on set, because the set is created in a compassionate way, that actually you do make better stuff. Because surprisingly, when people feel, you know, safe and happy, you know, they make
thrive.
better stuff.
You
know, so even if you're just thinking about it, like, how do I make, you know, quality films? This is a way to do it. You know, make it authentic films in a compassionate way, and it will make a good film. One of my, like, conditions of involvement at the beginning was that I said I want an internship program. I want a paid creative internship program for trans and gender diverse people, because it's not enough for me to just think about how do I make something good that looks good for me. It's how, if we're not able at this point to hire trans directors, because there weren't directors available in New Zealand of the caliber that was required for the for that amount of money, that was also going to be signed off by the funders and blah blah blah, producery stuff, related stuff. That then you don't just go, oh well, guess there's not. You go, okay, not for this season, but what can we do to make that more likely for later on down the track? And so we had 6 interns, trans interns that were paid very well. I mean, we called them interns for funding purposes and things like that on applications and things, but it kind of was more like a knowledge sharing role. That yes, the trans people were there to learn about that that department, from the HODs and stuff, but those heads of department were there to learn about trans experience and how to authentically portray trans experiences from the people that were the experts in that. So a good example, is in our art department, where it was yes, our art director is has more experience in art direction, but our trans intern has more experience in what the flat of trans activists looks like. Because oh my god, and I mean you've got to kind of laugh about it sometimes when you almost play shitty trans representation bingo, when if you've got to watch these things and you're like, oh my god, it's going to be terrible, and I can either just feel awful, or I can laugh about it and be like, oh my god, this is failing on so many levels. But I've seen ones where you're just like, who in their right mind thought that would be on the wall in this this flat that's supposedly a bunch of trans people living who are all artists and something like that, and you're just like,
live, laugh, love.
And it's also meant it was easier sourcing these things, because Ari, our art intern, when it was where will I find posters that would be on the wall in a 30-something trans woman activist's house? Maybe my 30-something trans activist, trans femme
could help you with that.
Friends' houses might have those things. So, and that's been a really cool thing about that sense of community ownership and stuff as well, is even if it's just something as little as oh my god, that's the picture that's on the wall at my house, or that's a shirt that I donated. My particular little thing is that my mum and dad play the 2 councillors that are on either side of the mayor.
That's amazing. So they're non-speaking roles, so you have to just sit and look officious
and look judgmental and conservative. And in fact, I remember I was here when my mum was deciding what she was holding these things out from her wardrobe, and she was like, does this make me look judgmental, small town conservative council member? And I was like, I don't know, I think it's a little bit too hip. And she's like, she's like, do these pearls say, I am feeling really judgy about your lifestyle choices? And my sister and my brother-in-law are other townspeople as well, and and just
nice.
All kinds of things like that, where I'm like, oh, that's the hands of my flatmate, or oh, that's my friend's poster that they did, and those are my shoes that I donated.
I binged it when I watched it last year, but I loved it from the get-go. You really get this sense of strong community, and the activists are there in the street, and that there's a lot going on, a lot of exciting stuff. afoot.
Yeah.
What's your next project? That's the other thing I wanted to ask you before we finish off.
Well, the next project is actually Rurangi season 2. We just
Aha.
found out yesterday that we got development funding for a
Yes.
second season. So
Okay.
everyone who's been like, you've got to tell me more. I want to like live in this town, and I want these people to be my friends. And it's like, well, yeah. So that's
because
really
the last
exciting.
time we spoke, that's what I was desperately trying to find out. But obviously, that was February or something. So
a lot of very hard
excited.
work from Max Curry, the director, and Craig Gainsborough, our incredible producer, putting together the application for that funding. And yeah, we just found out that last night. Yeah,
that is the best news. And you just won an award in Melbourne as well, right? You've won loads of awards, but I was looking at your website this morning and there was another one. So yeah,
I feel like a real dick, and I'm
rolling.
not doing it deliberately. But when I'm like, which one out of the awards?
Which one is that?
I think I do remember that now. It's more my shitty memory than actually any kind of false modesty. Because yeah, I mean, just talking about trans people and self-esteem and things like that. Like, this project has been a huge thing for me, as far as like, even feeling like I can now honestly say I made a thing and it's really good.
And it's incredibly well deserved, because it's a brilliant piece of
Thank
work.
you.
And I know that our audiences are just absolutely going to lap it up and doggedly seek out all the future episodes and the film. So
Yes.
I would recommend people to get onto the Rurangi website for that. But thank you so much for talking to me. It's morning here, but evening for you.
Bye.
Cheerio. Bye. So please click over to the transcreative.uk website, and we're going to watch the first 2 episodes of the Rurangi web series.